Relatively new democracies apparently having difficulty.
We are at the turning point in history, whether democracy is winning or democracy is losing.
Hello and welcome to a special talk event on a very important subject, global democracy, its health, its future, and the implications for the Indo-Pacific region. I'm Jonathan Soble, former Tokyo bureau chief at the Financial Times, currently a partner at Kreab Japan, a strategic communications firm here in Tokyo. Today my co-host and commentator is Yuichi Hosoya, professor at Keio University and the head of the Keio Center for Strategy. Before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about the center?
Yes, thank you very much for your kind introduction. We have established a new think tank within Keio University in March this year, Keio Center for Strategy. And the Keio Center for Strategy is trying to be a hub of researchers at Keio University, business community, as well as government institutions. By combining these talents, we are trying to create discussion, rich discussion within the think tank, both internally and internationally.
Great, thank you very much. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our special guest today. She's Maiko Ichihara. She's a professor at Hitotsubashi University, an expert on foreign policy, human rights, and democracy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Your particular interest really is disinformation, what you call the narrative war, right? And I'm wondering, if this is a war between authoritarian forces and liberal democratic forces, both within countries and among them, who's winning and why?
Well, it's really hard to tell who's winning, and I do not think that either side of winning. Well, I say this because influence operations of authoritarian countries, which is to try to distort information to win behaviors and policy changes of other countries, can be considered effective only when we see some big problems, like Trump's winning in 2016 elections, for example, or Brexit in Britain. But as far as we do not see that kind of problem, we tend to think that actually those influence operations are nothing. Well, they may be doing something, but we don't have to care. Well, the issue, the reality is actually different. We have to worry about multiple things. Actually, Russia and China are the main actors in this field, but they tend to use different methodologies. Russia traditionally has been using much more aggressive sort of methodologies, such as massive amount of spread of disinformation, which is called the fire hose of falsehood. And they also even sometimes conduct assassination of some of the activists, for example. And China used not to do that. Their traditional tactics is to create their own narratives in a way that people outside of the countries can be pro-China and support Chinese CCP propaganda. And for that sake, they have been also training journalists, police officers, and legal professionals in their country, inviting them from Asia and Africa to China. But recently, we have been seeing sort of change in China's influence operations in a way that China started using Russia-like tools. And one thing we can see is that China is said to have started to interfere into U.S. elections from 2022. While China was refraining from doing so up until 2020. And China's election interference into Southeast Asian countries has been also pretty strong. And in the Japanese society, we have recently seen a massive attack from China in terms of the discharge of treated water. And even before then, we saw the Russia and China's cooperation in terms of propaganda warfare related to Russian aggression of Ukraine.
Right. You mentioned the firehood of falsehood. That was a big issue as far back as the 2016 election in the United States. Since then, there has been a range of attempts to deal with it, both from governments and from the social media platforms like Facebook that have ended up hosting the water from this fire hose. How do you judge whether how do you evaluate the effectiveness of these efforts so far?
Well, it's once again, it's very difficult to talk about the effectiveness. But one thing I will have to probably raise an issue is the impact onto intellectuals. Actually, this is the case of Russian propaganda campaign during the aggression into Ukraine. Well, Russian propaganda was spread not only by Russian state media and also Russian trolls, but also Chinese trolls as well as Japanese conspiracy theorists. And such kind of propaganda as NATO's eastward expansion was the reason why Russia went into Ukraine, or Ukraine actually had neo-Nazis who have been killing Russian residents in the country, have spread in the Japanese Twitter as well. And Russian embassy in Japan's Twitter account actually was one of the top 5 most popular Twitter accounts, well, during especially the early period of Russian aggression into Ukraine, and that was because of these, trolls' help, and that actually impacted those Japanese intellectuals who hope to see the termination of war in the region as soon as possible, and unfortunately, there rose whataboutist sort of discourse. And they started saying that, well, apparently Russian aggression of Ukraine is, violation of sovereignty, violation of human rights, and so forth. And so this is not justifiable. But United States, for example, went into Iraq in early 2000s and into Afghanistan. And so, well, we all have to blame each other, sort of discourse appeared. And, well, that's considered as whataboutism, which was impacted by Russian propaganda. And I actually conducted, according to my research, I actually conducted a correspondence analysis of taking, some of the articles that shows whataboutism. And this graph actually shows the result of the, correspondence analysis. And the terminologies that cluster with each other closely are the terminologies that are used very frequently with each other. And I coded adjectives into positive adjectives and negative adjectives in order to understand what kind of adjectives those articles use. And the result shows that, well, apparently because these are articles that talk about Russian aggression of Ukraine, so they do talk about Russian Ukraine. As related actors, or the actors that have been supporting Ukraine, they talk about NATO and the West, for example. But unfortunately, as you can probably see, slightly negative terminologies are more often used when it comes to NATO and West. So they are showing slightly more negative images about those Western countries. And unfortunately, they also did not see that China as an actor. Well, as the graph shows, China is located pretty far from the core of the cluster of wars. That means that they were not aware about China's role in this propaganda warfare going on with the Russian aggression of Ukraine.
When we say disinformation, the first thing that comes to mind is lies, spreading things that are not factual. But of course, that's only part of what you call the narrative war. There's also using things that are true, like the U.S. invaded Iraq, and trying to turn the discourse around that and away from the subject at hand, right? Yeah. All right. You also mentioned Japan, both as having a role in this disinformation, being part of it, as well as being a target, right? So the Fukushima water release, for example, how has Japan sort of reacted to this? I'd like to get both of your takes on that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very interesting case. Apparently, those disinformation attack against the Japanese society was really harsh at the time of the discharging of treated water from the Fukushima area. And CCP has been actually conducting this narrative warfare related to this treated water from 2021, when former Prime Minister Suga announced that Japan is going to discharge the treated water. And well, from around July 2023, which was right before the discharge started, the campaign became much harsher, and various kinds of disinformation were out there. For example, one of the disinformation said like Prime Minister Kishida had some seafood in Japan and then was hospitalized, or IAEA officials received some bribes from the Japanese government, created some false information about the tritium level of the treated water kind of thing, which were disinformation. And together with those, massive amount of phone calls from Chinese citizens, the entire Japanese society was under attack. And apparently, when those authoritarian countries, actors, tried to target some other societies with those, influence operations, one of the, purposes that they have is to divide the country and destabilize the country. So in this case, they probably tried to, divide between those stakeholders like fishermen and also those who were, going against the discharging of the treated water, and those people who supported the discharge. But the end result was that Japanese people started actually, making more tax contribution to the Fukushima area and purchasing more seafood from the Fukushima area. So they decided to go for supporting the Fukushima area. So instead of getting divided, within the Japanese society, what we saw was the integration of the society. And this has been actually kind of a traditional reaction that the Japanese society tends to have. Whenever we have some kind of political tensions, Japanese people are very reluctant about conducting boycotts, showing their criticisms or feelings of opposition and stuff. But they like to have boycotts. Buy things, buy things and support things. So that was actually what we saw during the COVID as well. Many people purchased things from like nearby stores, or they had a campaign of, okay, well, let's support those restaurants in our neighborhood by buying some food from there and have those nice food at home and stuff.
First of all, so do you think that's a sign of the robustness of the democracy that we talked about, or should Japan be more worried about the potential immediate or longer-term effects of disinformation being caught up in the narrative war?
Right. Perhaps the both. I enjoy listening to what Ichihara-san is talking about, because these things are extremely important, but at the same time, these operations or activities are basically unseen and unnoticed by ordinary people. First of all, we need to learn what they are doing and what these activity means to us. So first of all, we need to learn these kind of realities, as well as the concepts, as well as those kind of the evolution of new methods. So this is one thing. The other thing is that the operations and authoritarian regimes are basically empowered by digitalized technologies, as well as SNS and AI and so on. These kind of recent developments. So with these recent developments of information and technologies, they are becoming more powerful than before. It means that we are becoming more vulnerable to these kind of operations. So we need to defend ourselves from those attacks, because those attacks are basically quite cheap, unlike launching missiles or using nuclear weapons, and basically these are unseen. So these activities are often quite immune to criticisms or any counteractions. In the sense, we really need to learn many things what today Ichihara-san has been talking about, and also we need to have much robust defense to these kind of realities.
Well, we are out of time. It's been a very stimulating and very timely discussion. I want to thank my co-host and commentator, Professor Hosoya, as well as our special guest, Professor Ichihara. Thank you very much, and goodbye.